Beloved, Trauma and the Legacy of Slavery in Toni Morrison's Masterwork. Toni Morrison's Beloved stands as one of the most profound and haunting explorations of slavery's psychological aftermath in American literature. Published in 1987, this Pulitzer Prize-winning novel transcends conventional historical fiction by embodying trauma itself in the spectral figure of Beloved, forcing both characters and readers to confront the unresolved wounds of America's most shameful institution. Through its innovative narrative structure and complex character development, Beloved reveals how the legacy of slavery continues to reverberate through generations, shaping individual and collective identities in ways that demand acknowledgement, confrontation, and ultimately, healing. The Architecture of Trauma, 124, Bluestone Road. The novel opens with one of literature's most chilling declarations: 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom. This house at 124, Bluestone Road becomes more than a mere setting, it transforms into a physical manifestation of psychological trauma. The baby's venom signifies the spirit of the murdered child Beloved, whose haunting presence permeates every corner of the dwelling. Morrison's genius lies in making the house itself a character, one that breathes with the accumulated suffering of its inhabitants and bears witness to the horrors that slavery has wrought upon the human psyche. The spitefulness of the house reflects what trauma theorists describe as the return of the repressed, wherein unresolved trauma resurfaces in disruptive and often destructive ways. For Seeth, the house represents both sanctuary and prison, a space where she can protect her surviving family while simultaneously being tormented by the ghost of her past actions. This paradox captures the complex nature of post-traumatic existence, where safety and suffering become inextricably intertwined. Beloved as the embodiment of collective memory. The arrival of Beloved in physical form marks the novel's central turning point, forcing all characters to confront their suppressed memories and unprocessed grief. Beloved functions as more than just the ghost of Seeth's murdered daughter, she embodies the collective trauma of all enslaved people who died unnamed and unremembered. Her fragmented speech patterns and insatiable hunger for recognition mirror the fragmented nature of traumatic memory itself. Morrison's decision to give physical form to psychological trauma serves multiple narrative purposes. As one scholar notes, Beloved's role as the embodiment of trauma enables Seeth and Denver to overcome their pasts. Through Beloved's demanding presence, characters are forced to articulate experiences that had previously been unspeakable. The novel suggests that trauma cannot be simply forgotten or suppressed, it must be acknowledged and integrated into one's understanding of self and history. The unbearable weight of maternal love. Central to Beloved is Morrison's exploration of motherhood under the dehumanizing conditions of slavery. Seeth's decision to kill her infant daughter rather than allow her to be returned to slavery represents the ultimate maternal paradox, an act of love that is simultaneously an act of violence. This infanticide, based on the historical case of Margaret Garner, illuminates the impossible choices that enslaved mothers faced when their children's freedom hung in the balance. The novel presents Seeth's action not as madness but as a rational response to an irrational system. As Paul D. tells Seeth, "You got 2 feet, Seeth, not 4, reminding her of her humanity in a world that sought to reduce enslaved people to livestock. Yet Seeth's maternal passion becomes dangerous, inhibiting her own individuation and preventing her from developing a sense of self beyond her role as protector. This dynamic reveals how slavery's dehumanization extended beyond physical bondage to psychological and emotional realms. The trauma of separation between mothers and children under slavery creates lasting wounds that transcend individual experience. Baby Suggs, Seeth's mother-in-law, dealt with this by refusing to become close with her children and remembering what she could of them, while Seeth tried to hold on to them and fight for them, to the point of killing them so they could be free. These contrasting responses highlight the impossible emotional landscape that enslaved women navigated. Fragmented narratives and the structure of memory. Morrison employs a deliberately fragmented narrative structure that mirrors the disjointed nature of traumatic memory. The novel's nonlinear progression, with its sudden shifts in time and perspective, reflects what trauma theorist Kathy Carruth describes as the nonlinear processing of trauma. Memories emerge not as coherent stories but as intrusive fragments that disrupt the present moment, much like the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. This structural innovation serves both artistic and political purposes. By refusing to present slavery's horrors in a linear, digestible format, Morrison forces readers to experience something analogous to the cognitive disruption that trauma survivors endure. The novel's fragmented form becomes a form of literary testimony, bearing witness to experiences that resist conventional narrative representation. Identity and the search for selfhood. The theme of identity crisis permeates every character's journey in Beloved. As Morrison writes, freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of that freed self was another. This distinction between physical and psychological freedom forms the core of the novel's exploration of post-slavery identity formation. Characters must not only escape physical bondage but also reconstruct their sense of self in a world that has systematically denied their humanity. Seeth, Paul D., and Denver each struggle with questions of selfhood that slavery has complicated or corrupted. Their identities have been fragmented by violence, separation, and dehumanization, leaving them to piece together new concepts of self from the wreckage of their experiences. The process of reclaiming identity becomes both individual and collective, requiring not only personal courage but also community support. The role of community in healing. Throughout Beloved, Morrison emphasizes the essential role of community in processing and healing from trauma. Seeth's isolation from the black community serves as protection but also perpetuates her suffering. Her home becomes a prison, where she tries to build a protective wall for herself and her family, yet this isolation prevents the healing process from taking place. The novel's climax occurs when the community of women arrives at 124 Bluestone Road to exorcise Beloved, demonstrating the power of collective action in confronting historical trauma. This scene suggests that individual healing cannot occur in isolation, it requires the support and witness of others who share similar experiences. The community's intervention represents a form of collective responsibility for addressing the ongoing effects of historical trauma. Denver's courage to leave the confines of 124 and seek help from the community marks a crucial turning point in the novel's exploration of healing. Her decision to step off the edge of the world and ask for help demonstrates the necessity of moving beyond isolation toward connection and mutual support. Through Denver's actions, Morrison illustrates how younger generations can break cycles of trauma by choosing community over isolation. Memory, forgetting, and the ethics of remembrance. The novel's famous concluding lines, "It was not a story to pass on," present a complex meditation on the relationship between memory and healing. This phrase can be read as both a directive to forget and an imperative to remember, capturing the ambivalent relationship that trauma survivors have with their painful pasts. Morrison suggests that while some experiences may be too painful to continually retell, they must nonetheless be acknowledged and preserved in collective memory. The novel itself serves as a form of literary memorial, giving voice to experiences that have been silenced or suppressed in official historical narratives. By centering the perspectives of enslaved women and their descendants, Beloved challenges dominant cultural narratives that have minimized or romanticized the realities of slavery. Conclusion: the continuing relevance of Beloved. Beloved remains profoundly relevant more than 3 decades after its publication because it addresses fundamental questions about how societies reckon with historical trauma. Morrison's novel demonstrates that the effects of slavery did not end with emancipation but continue to reverberate through subsequent generations in the form of inherited trauma, disrupted family structures, and ongoing racial injustice. The novel's exploration of trauma and memory provides a framework for understanding how historical violence continues to shape contemporary experience. Through its complex portrayal of characters struggling to forge new identities and relationships in the aftermath of unimaginable suffering, Beloved offers both a searing indictment of slavery's lasting effects and a vision of possibility for healing and renewal. Morrison's masterwork ultimately argues that confronting difficult truths about the past, however painful, is essential for individual and collective healing. By giving physical form to the psychological wounds of slavery, Beloved makes visible the ongoing work required to address historical trauma and create more just and compassionate communities. In doing so, it stands as both a literary achievement and a moral imperative, challenging readers to acknowledge the full complexity of America's racial history and its continuing effects on contemporary life.